Those who faced a would-be killer and survived. What words saved your life? When I was 14, I was looking after my cousins who were 5 and 3 years old. I remember this one time, the 5-year-old found his dad's handgun. He started waving it around like it was some kind of toy, pointing it at different things and pretending to shoot. Thankfully, without putting his finger anywhere near the trigger, at one point he even pointed it at me and pretended to be a bank robber. So, I told him if he gave me the gun, he could have the Oreos we had on the counter, and we could both enjoy some. Amazingly, it worked. I quickly put the gun on a high shelf where he couldn't reach it and left it there until my aunt and uncle got back home. It turned out the gun was actually loaded. My aunt was furious and made my uncle buy a gun safe and store all the guns in the garage from then on. Narrator comment: kids and guns. A scary combination. Glad I was able to prevent a tragedy. Story 2. My brother was once attacked by a guy with a knife right inside our house. The thing is, my brother didn't even know the guy had a knife when he put him in a headlock. That's when he let out a whistle for our dad. Now, my brother can whistle at around 120 decibels, especially when he's angry. Hearing this high-pitched whistle, the guy immediately dropped the knife and covered his ear. My brother, not missing a beat, pulled the guy's hand off his ear, put his mouth right up to it, and let out 4 or 5 more ear-splitting whistles as loud as he could. By the time Dad arrived and threw the guy out the door, he could barely stand up straight. His equilibrium was completely shot. I wouldn't be surprised if he's still deaf to this day. Story 3. I was 19 and it was my first time in Europe. I started in Italy visiting family, and on my very first night I went out for a walk. A group of guys who looked like they were trouble started pushing me around. Then they pulled out knives and demanded money. I guess I looked like I had some, since I stood out as a foreigner because of my clothes. The problem was, all I had on me was $20 and a condom. Yep, a rubber.
Why?
Because I was so naive. I thought I could easily get lucky with the local girls. I was expecting them to just see me and offer to sleep with me, based on some stuff I heard. So, I explained this whole situation to these guys in broken, 1960s Italian that I learned from my parents. They burst out laughing and wished me good luck. Narrator comment: youth, sometimes I cringe looking back at my younger self. Story 4. I remember one time I was accosted by a kid with a gun. He couldn't have been older than 13. I can't recall the exact words, but basically, he looked at me and said, "Give me anything you have and I'll let you go." I wanted to freak out, but something told me to stay calm. So I asked him, "Is that a real gun? Or is it just an airsoft?" He pulled out the clip to show me, and sure enough, it was real. Surprisingly, I then said something like, "Look, kid, I only have $5 and this crappy phone. It's not going to get you anything. Is it really worth spending your life in prison if you shoot me?" He looked at me, then at the gun, then back at me. Suddenly, he started crying, turned around, and walked away. I immediately called the police and told them about the kid walking around on 14th Street with a gun. By the time they arrived, the kid was long gone. I pointed the cops in the direction he went and gave them a description, but I'm not sure whatever happened. Story 5. I managed to talk my way out of getting stabbed during a robbery once. I don't know if the guy would have actually killed me, but he definitely would have hurt me pretty badly. I just told him to relax, put the knife away, and he could have whatever he wanted. So he put the knife away and started going through my stuff while I just stood there, annoyed. What's even weirder? I then went to breakfast with a girl right after and just continued with my day like nothing happened. Story 6. This one time, I'm not entirely sure how close I came to being murdered. This happened when I was working the register at McDonald's. It was around 10 p.m. We weren't open 24 hours and we're about to close up soon when this really drunk guy walks in. He comes up to the counter and starts chatting with me about random things. It was mostly nonsense, and I can't really remember what he was saying, but I began to get the feeling that he was more than just drunk. I was trying my best to humor him, just waiting for him to leave. Then, out of nowhere, he says, "If I was going to kill everyone in here, I'd kill you first because you look like you know what to do." I took it as a kind of morbid joke and just said, thanks." At that point, he pulled out a gun from his waistband and pointed it at me. It wasn't like a full-on point. He was just kind of limply holding it in my direction. I didn't know what to do and only hoped to God that he was still joking. Then he said bang and tucked the gun back into his waistband. I think he just wanted to let me know that he could kill me if he wanted to. He left shortly after that. I told my manager, who then informed me that the man was a regular customer and a long-term friend of his. He tried to downplay the whole thing. I ended up leaving that job shortly after to go to school. Story 7. It was my sister's 21st birthday, so the whole family and a few of her friends decided to go out to a bar together. We drove in 3 separate cars to this small bar. The night started off fine. Everyone was dancing and drinking. Then, this group of about 15 people walked in. As soon as they did, they started bumping into people, staring at the girls, and trying to start fights with the guys. I told my girlfriend that we needed to watch out for these guys, so we stayed clear of them, me and my girl kept to ourselves, just watching everyone when we saw these guys surround my sister's friend. So I went over and pulled them away from the situation and asked what happened. He said that he was just complimenting the guys on their hats because we're all 49er fans. Those guys ended up leaving. We headed out about 20 minutes later. I grabbed my sister and her 2 friends and we headed to the car. As we're walking to the car, I see 3 guys from that group walk towards my car from the other side of the parking lot. I told everyone to get in the car, and my girls started forcing my sisters and her friends inside. While I approached them, what's good? What's up, homie? You guys got a problem? Me? Whatever happened inside, just leave it inside. It's my sister's birthday, and I'm not trying to have any trouble tonight. We good? I should have known something was about to happen. One of them was holding his shirt over his face, and another had his hat pulled down low and was holding his waist. But the main guy looks at them and says, "Yeah, we're good." And I shake his hand, then the other guy's hand. But this guy with his hat pulled down low won't shake my hand and won't take his hand off his waist, so I say, "Your boy says we're cool. We don't want no problems." At that moment, my uncle and my best friend came around the corner and started yelling, "Yo! Hey!" That's when it happened. All 3 guys pulled out their guns and started shooting in the air, and then shot towards my uncle and best friend. Everyone started screaming, but I didn't even flinch. It was really weird. I just looked around, and one of these guys said, "What about him?" and looks right at me and just says, "Forget it." And they run back to their cars. I walked to my car and drove to where my uncle and friend were, stopped the car, and just heard my mom and aunt screaming that my uncle got shot. Cops came and spent the next 2 hours talking to the cops about what had happened, what they looked like, etc. We found out why they approached us later that night. Apparently, while my sister, uncles, and friends were smoking outside, those guys came outside to smoke, and while smoking said some racist stuff to our friends, and they ended up pushing and shoving, and my sister decked one of them. They found the guys later, and we testified against them. They're serving 15 to 20 years. My uncle was really lucky. They shot him in the back and missed all his organs. I found out later that before they left the bar, they were in the bathroom snorting drugs, and that they were planning on just walking up to the car and unloading. Narrator comment: that was a night I will never forget. So many close calls. Story 8. I almost got knifed in the Dominican Republic by these 2 kids in tiny town. They saw me walking around at night and came to my hotel with knives. I was out on the balcony in front of my room, and they came up to me, not saying a word but brandishing large enough knives. So I put my hands up and, trying to remain cool, reached into my pocket and handed them $200 of local currency, and they ran off. The kicker is, my wife was in an unlocked room right there with maybe $2,500 and all of our stuff. I made enough noise about it, talking calmly but loudly enough, that I heard the door lock. Thank God. My first thought was, okay, they want money. My second was, what if they get in that room with my wife? That second question still screws with me. Anyway, this town is small, so I walked over to the police station and explained what happened. The cops were like, "Oh, yeah, we probably know who it is. Come back tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock and we'll have you identify them." I came back at 9 o'clock and they had both of them in custody. I never got my money back, but whatever. Story 9. This didn't happen to me, but my dad was getting gas in a particularly sketchy part of town that he wasn't usually in. A man approaches my dad as he's filling his gas tank, points a gun at him and shouts, "Give me your wallet." Instead, my dad pulls the gas nozzle out of his truck and sprays the guy. At the time, my dad smoked, so he pulled out his Zippo lighter and begins to strike it. The best part is that the robber called the police on my dad for trying to light him on fire. In the end, my dad got away with nothing taken, and the other guy got hauled away in a police car. Narrator comment: my dad was always a little bit crazy, but brave, I suppose. Story 10. This also didn't happen to me, but to my dad. He was about 25 at the time, probably 35 years ago now. He lived in a bad neighborhood, and after getting a pack of cigarettes from a 7-Eleven, he was sitting in his car for a second when a young guy came up to his window with a gun. My dad says he said, "Give me all your money or I'll kill you right here, right now." He said, "Look, I have $30 and frankly, that money is mine. You're going to have to kill me for it. Is it worth the blood of a human and most likely life in prison for $30? He said the guy had this type of, well, whatever attitude about it. Gave him a goodbye tap on his car like he just came up to say hello and walked away. He said the guy was really casual about it, like oddly, so he didn't sleep well for a few months after that experience. Story 11. I don't know if he wanted to murder us, but he was definitely up to no good. My mom and I were just walking somewhere. I don't remember where to. I was much younger, but it was in the south of France somewhere. There was a guy who came around the corner and got in our way, telling us he has a gun in his pocket, which was probably BS, and that we needed to give him everything to pass. My mom grew up in Paris and walked through shady parts when she was younger and knows how to react, so she just straight up told him, "No, thanks," slapped his shoulder a little to push him out of the way, and went by him. Narrator comment. My mom doesn't play around. You don't mess with a Parisian woman. Story 12. I'm a motorcycle rider, and a little over a year ago, I bought my Sena 20s headset. At the time, it was exactly what I wanted: great sound quality for music, clear calls, and easy contact with my fellow riders. Little did I know that it would one day save my life. On February 28, 2016, around 9:30 p.m., I got home from a ride. As I got off my bike in the driveway, a man with a gun confronted me. He had broken into my home. He demanded that I go inside the house, and as I approached the door, he threw my cell phone onto the ground. As I crossed the threshold, he forced me to the ground and bound my hands and feet with phone cord. The intruder then went back to ransacking my house while I lay there in my helmet, wondering what was going to happen to me. Sometime later, my roommate pulled up and parked his car in the garage. The intruder ran out the front door to confront him. I heard a scuffle outside for a few minutes, after which my roommate was forced into the house, bloodied, beaten, and then bound in a separate room. The destruction of the house continued once again. He discovered the safe, pistol, and rifle cases, violently demanding the keys and combinations while kicking my roommate. He started talking irrationally about how he was looking for CP and assault rifles, claiming someone had sent him to the house months earlier and that he had been watching the house for a couple of days. He was going to hold us up for about 2 days while he cleaned up his fingerprints and burned parts of the house to get rid of DNA. He would then drive us into the middle of nowhere and leave us for dead. While he was spending time in the back room attempting to break into the safe, I was able to break one of my hands free and turn my Sena on. The moment the Sena said "phone connected," I had a small glimmer of hope. The noise of the intruder breaking into the safe gave me an opportunity to access the voice command speed dial system on the Sena. Whispering quietly, I didn't necessarily care who would end up calling. I just prayed for anyone to answer. My father, who is 3 hours ahead in the Eastern time zone, answered, and I repeatedly whispered, 911, 911, 911. He eventually replied back to me, 911, confirming that he knew there was a problem. I then started repeatedly whispering the address. At that point, the intruder came around the corner and yelled at me, "What is that noise?" I told him, "It's just the radio playing in the helmet. I can't turn it off." He proceeded to take a hammer to the side of my helmet while it was still on my head, destroying the Sena. He grabbed the remains and threw them into the toilet. He then started a fire in the fireplace to burn random items from around the house, including his own shoes, which he replaced with the shoes directly off my feet. My father eventually tried calling back, but when my cell phone rang, the intruder smashed it with a hammer and threw it into the fire as well. The police finally arrived and noticed the blood on the ground from the scuffle and called for backup. The intruder became nervous. He unbounded me and instructed me to go to the door and send the cops away. I agreed, stood up, and approached the front door. The police were shouting, "Local police department. Open the door," over and over again, and my roommate shouted back from the other room, "We are in here." Repeatedly, the intruder ran to the other room to silence my roommate. I reached out and opened the door to 5 or 6 officers with weapons drawn. I ran out into the front yard yelling, "Hostage," with my hands up, hoping that no one would shoot. As I was about to be restrained, the intruder slammed the door behind me. The police quickly withdrew back to the street. I was escorted by an officer as fast as possible to the street. Barely able to keep my footing as we moved, I was dragged through the front lawn and placed in the back of the squad car. I updated them on the situation inside the house and how to distinguish between my roommate and the intruder. The local SWAT team was called in to secure the house. After another 2 hours or so, my roommate was finally able to escape his bindings and make his way out of the house, beat up but safe. the intruder ended up escaping out of the back door of the house somewhere in that 2-hour window. The entire ordeal lasted around 6 hours. The suspect was eventually found in jail from unrelated charges and was linked to the case with evidence found at my house. On June 17th, after a year of BSing the court system with an attempt at getting off on mental disorder and a state psych hospital saying he is fit to stand trial, he was sentenced to 26 years in prison. Story 13. Once, when my mother was driving down to Tanzania with my uncle while she was pregnant with me, it was early in the afternoon, so she was extremely shocked to find a bunch of armed robbers waiting on the side of the road, like a pack of hyenas waiting for their prey to come to them. They started waving their guns around, telling my uncle and mother to get out of the car. I believe they intended to kill them. However, this is where it got interesting. The leader of that gang took one look at my mother's belly, saw that she was pregnant, and simply let them go. My mother tells me that when the leader saw that she was pregnant, his eyes filled with remorse. Maybe he was a father himself. Anyway, they took my uncle's wallet and bid us goodbye. To this day, I keep telling my uncle that I saved his life. Story 14. I'm not sure if this really counts, but I was alone by a lake one evening a few years ago. Insects were humming around, their wings glistening in the fading sunlight, and fish swam near my feet. It was incredibly chill, and I've rarely felt more peaceful until someone moved in the bushes. Now, normally I would have ignored this. People came and went from the spot fairly frequently. It was a popular makeout spot. But something felt off about this time. The person was taking too long, like they were trying to be quiet. I thought maybe it was a couple messing around, so I got to my feet and started to leave. As I turned to the exit, a man stepped from the bushes. He had a metal rod in one hand and a cord in the other. My first thought was that he was just collecting trash, but a second later, before I could even register why, I was suddenly viscerally angry. I wanted to hurt this man more than I've ever wanted to hurt anyone before. I think he must have saw the crazy in my eyes or something, though, because he hesitated and forced this weird smile. I was unarmed, but I slowly reached around my back like I was putting my hand on a gun, and he moved back into the bushes a few moments later. He reemerged empty-handed and asked how the fish were today. I said, "Good," flashed a smile, and left. Narrator comment. Sometimes you just have to trust your gut. I still wonder what that guy was up to. Story 15. My best friend growing up had an uncle with a bad temper that along with severe little man syndrome. Anyway, I was leaving her house one night after we'd hung out and studied together for school. As I walked around the cul-de-sac she lived on, I was grabbed from behind, and whoever it was trying to put me in a headlock. I could tell they were much shorter than me. I was nearing 5 feet 10 inches by the time I was 14, and naturally, this person couldn't have been more than 5 feet 5 inches at the max. So I put my chin down to stop them and flip him over my shoulder using everything that I had. I looked, and lo and behold, it's the uncle. I asked him, "What the F, man?" And he said, "Don't fight me, and it won't hurt so bad." I was terrified, but I knew this guy, so I said, "Come on, what's this about? Why are you doing this?" He did nothing but growl, and the look in his eyes said that he wasn't backing down. He'd recovered pretty quickly from my flip, but I swung my book-filled backpack at his face when he charged me, and he just hit the ground. After that, I ran back to my friend's house and told her dad everything. He went back out and beat the crap out of his brother. I wasn't allowed to go back to her house ever again after that. Story 16. I don't know if this guy was going to murder us, but it was super sketchy. My mom and I were walking back from a baseball game one summer after I got back from college. My mom had had a few drinks, so I was driving. On the way back, some sketchy dude started following us. I took a turn towards our car in a parking lot, and he started muttering things. I told him to go away, but he ignored me. I gave my mom my shirt that I got at the game and told her to run to the car. The dude then lunged at me after she took off, so I body slammed him and he landed on his butt, and I ran to the car, locked it, and we sped out of there. That was a scary yet exhilarating moment, and we just drove home after that. I live near a pretty bad city, so things like this are expected, so we saw no point in calling the police or stadium security, but it was frightening nonetheless. Story 17. I had just gotten off my apartment security job at a ghetto complex. As I walked to my car, a drug dealer was standing in front of it. He saw me and pulled a firearm out of his waistband and put it to my head. I looked at him and looked at the people around him. We were 10 feet from a pool full of parents and kids, and everyone was watching. I looked him in the eyes and said, "Do it if you want. I'm just a guard, and I'm off duty. I don't give a crap what you're doing here. This is just overtime for me, but look around. There's at least 20 witnesses. Someone will talk." I opened my car door and got in. He just put his gun back in his waistband, got on his bike, and left. I drove as fast as I could home and had to change my boxers. Story 18. This didn't happen to me, but to my dad once, right outside my Annie's house. My dad got out of his car. It was a cool car, and the neighborhood knew my dad because he's very outgoing. Then this kid runs up to him, points a gun to his head, and tells my dad to give him the keys. My dad snatched the gun from him, and all the neighbors were looking out at the scene. Then he hears, "Thomas, don't hurt my cousin, bro." He's challenged. The kid dropped to the floor crying, and my dad's friend was super apologetic. He took back the gun since it was his and not the kid's. That kid also became my babysitter for when I was little, which is weird, but that's how the hood works, I guess. Narrator comment. Some things are so strange they're hard to believe, but that's life sometimes, isn't it? Story 19. I grew up in a bad neighborhood and had to talk my way out of corners all the time. I also later studied sociology and criminology and kind of put the pieces together. See, I grew up in one of those post-Soviet cities with huge gray concrete blocks. It was pretty common that drunken teenage evenings would end up in someone getting beaten, stabbed, or something like that. Guns were rare, but people would get badly cut by broken bottles all the time. I was a weak, skinny, pale dude, you'd think. I'd be the first one to get beaten up. Actually, I never got so much as seriously punched in the face. I'm one of the very few guys I know to have that privilege. There's always some luck involved, too, but there's a method. My method was always the same. Quickly define the situation according to my rules. My first girlfriend didn't like to go downtown with me at first because as soon as we met, for instance, an aggressive group of drunken teens waving broken bottles that I knew we'd have to deal with anyway, I would calmly go to them and ask them for a cigarette or change. I would pick the one person that looked the most sober and calm and just start talking to them. Now, I've used this trick tons of times. Once, I was standing at an ATM withdrawing money, and two huge guys appeared out of nowhere, approaching me quickly. Before they managed to say anything, I blurted out, "You from around here? You look like you know your way around. See, I'm looking for this bar here." They were clearly put off balance, but one of them mumbled something along the lines of, "Yeah, they were from around there." They ended up showing me the way to a bar I didn't even want to come to anyway. Another time, two guys were clearly high on whatever and were impromptu rapping at the same time, terrorizing a good half of a bus with a huge pair of pincers. Yeah, that's a fun tool. I wasn't just able to get them to leave me alone, but I sat with them joking around, slowly getting them to calm down, and basically stopping them from cutting into a guy's ear. We split ways as best buds. Now, the key word to understand is situation. In sociology, there's this amazing book, The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life, by Erving Goffman. The guy argues that in all social situations, we basically jump into a role and just play the role. So, I'm the guy who rides the train, the guy who buys the ticket, the guy who hits on a woman, the teacher, the husband, or whatever. The behaviors and roles are mostly written. We just replay them now. The victim who is hit by 3 drunken guys at a bus station is also a role if you are very quick. You can stop the encounter from becoming the situation and invite the guys into a completely different one. It may well become 4 drunken guys talking about sports, smoking cigarettes at a bus station, no BS. I've done it a number of times and still am doing it regularly when I see it coming. You wouldn't believe how valuable people are when it comes to defining situations. Granted, that won't work on someone who is a professional on a job. You won't steer a professional pickpocket into becoming your drunken best pal. These are rare, however. Most thieves are not professionals, and the safest thing to do is to just give them what they want. The thing is that very few roles actually involve as hard, non-negotiable conditions: punching someone in the face or stabbing them. Thieves never want that. They want to cash. Aggressive drunks may want that, but it's never about you. They're just looking for someone who will play with them in the mini-play called The Victim Who is Hit by 3 Drunken Guys at a Bus Station. They will force you into the scenario, sure, but if you act quickly and with a cool head, you can change it into a different one. The second trick, the one that works with groups, is to become part of the group. That's why you need to select the one person that's not drunk and not that aggressive or simply looks talkable. If they do as much as answer your question that they don't have a cigarette, you're probably good. Then you mumble and ask if there's a place nearby where you can buy a pack. If he starts thinking and looking around, you're good. At this point, his drunken pals are looking at you. But now you're part of the group, you see? You still have to be on your guard, but you're good for now. 95% of success is staying calm because you being frightened is only part of those scenarios that you don't want to go into. The perfect stance is calm innocence, like asking them for a cigarette is the normalest thing to do. The thing to avoid is bravado. Two, because that wakes up their inner male and stirs their testosterone. Never talk to the ladies in the company first, either. It might seem like a reasonable scenario to get into their group, but it isn't. Instead, you're now hitting on their ladies. I know it sounds dopey, but it really did save me from a number of life-threatening and certainly dangerous situations.